Hi, my name is Taylor Darcy with Darcy Law. I am a business attorney. I work with small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, anybody that's really getting started, help them create a strong foundation so they can have a successful business and last past the typical attrition rate. Today, we're going to talk about how to start an LLC. In my other videos, we've talked about starting as a sole proprietor. We've talked about doing a business, a DBA, fictitious business name statement. We've talked about why you would want to start an LLC. Today, we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of how to do it. So the process begins with filing what are called the articles of organization with the Secretary of State. Now, in California, you can do this electronically. They actually just recently changed this. So you need to know that it's very simple to go online and to fill that out. It takes about 10 minutes, and the results come back in about 2 to 3 business days. Depends on how busy they are, so sometimes it can take longer, so don't quote me on that. But the principle is that it's fairly simple to do. Now, if that was all that you needed to do, you would never need an attorney for anything else like that. There would be no reason, and I would just be telling you you're good. So the next part of the equation, though, is that once you've filled that out, then you need to have an operating agreement. Now, an operating agreement is basically the nuts and the bolts of it. An operating agreement helps you decide how the business is going to be run, who's going to run the business, and what type of capital contributions that you're going to have. Is it labor or is it money? And sometimes they're both. Also, who's going to own the assets? How is the company going to be run? Who's going to do the running? So in other words, who's going to be the president? Who's going to be the vice president or CEO or COO, CFO, whatever, whoever it is. So the operating agreement is a key component to it. Now, an operating agreement, here's one of the things that's important to know. LegalZoom and a lot of these other like DIY type things, you pay a lot of money for and you don't get a lot back. In other words, they can't do the operating agreement. An operating agreement is a legal document that needs to be drafted typically by an attorney. Not typically, it needs to be drafted by an attorney. I apologize. So the key, though, is that once you have that operating agreement in place, then you're going to need to have a bank account, and you're also going to need to have a EIN number from the IRS, and you're also going to need a business license. Now, some of those things that you can do fairly easily. The EIN is a piece of cake, doesn't take long. The real work comes in doing the operating agreement. And that's because that's where the real meat of being an LLC is for. And here's why that's important. The problem is if you just do the articles of organization at the Secretary of State, you get a business license, you get the EIN, and you get a bank account, great. Those are all good things. I've had clients before where I've worked with them and I do everything except for the bank account, and they leave the bank account in their name and not get an LLC bank account, and all of a sudden they've got problems. And so that's very important that you do everything so that they're truly separate. You have a personal bank account and you have an LLC bank account. But the main reason why an operating agreement is so important and why that's necessary is because, as I talked about in one of my other videos about piercing the corporate veil, one of the things that a court looks at is whether or not you have kept up with the formalities that go with a business entity. Now, I'll talk more about this in the corporate law, but with an LLC, it's a hybrid. You get the liability protection that goes with a business entity, but you don't have to keep up with the same level of formalities that you would in a corporation. So That's why an operating agreement is so important. So it's not really a complicated process, but it is important that it's followed correctly. You can run the risk of being hurt later, right? That's the issue, is that very rarely do people start out with being, doing the wrong thing, or they don't ever intend on getting sued, but it does happen. And it happens more frequently than we'd like. But, people make mistakes and people bring frivolous lawsuits. And so it's important that you protect yourself. Now, a liability shield, such as an LLC, doesn't protect you from everything, but it protects a lot. Okay, so I hope that answers your question on how to form an LLC, at least in the state of California. I don't know in other states, but that's the simple and long of it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, like. I'd love to talk with you more and help you build your business. Again, my name is Taylor Darcy. I'm with Darcy Law. I look forward to helping you, and I hope you have a great day. Talk to you soon.